Witches, wizards, and the occasional house elf. There is no shortage of interesting characters that'll cross our paths in Hogwarts Legacy, and you know what? It's high time we talk about them. Hey there friends, it's Codiak here. Welcome back to Legacy Gaming. Today, we're diving back into the wizarding world and talking about some of the intriguing characters we'll meet during our adventures in Hogwarts Legacy. In today's video, I thought we'd have a bit of fun and try and break down all of the major characters the team has showcased up until this point, ahead of launch. We all know that Hogwarts Legacy is a story-driven game, which means these characters will play a huge role in defining our experience within the wizarding world. Keep in mind, we're going to dip into speculation territory here, something we don't often do here on the channel. Not everything we talk about can be proven, but that's what's fun about it. If you have thoughts about any of the characters we talk about today, be sure to leave them in the comments section below. Centaurs have been a part of the Hogwarts mythos from the very beginning. While much of their way of life is a mystery, there are a few things we know about these beasts, and yes, they are referred to as beasts, a choice they made for themselves. Gifted in divination, centaurs in the wizarding world are strong-willed but often aloof, spending years working to perfect their particular brand of seeing. As we know from the Harry Potter series, the relationship between the Forbidden Forest centaur herd and wizards is tepid at best. Things don't seem to be any different nearly a century earlier, during the events of Hogwarts Legacy. In the one scene we've seen, the Centaurs encircle the player character and Poppy Sweeting, confronting them for entering the Forbidden Forest. While we don't know the main Centaur's name, it's clear he's some sort of leader within the herd. You'll notice he's wearing a completely different medallion than the rest of the Centaurs, and the authority in his voice makes me believe he's got some serious clout within the colony. If I were to venture a guess, I would bet that this encounter is part of our introduction into the Forbidden Forest within the game. According to most fantasy lore, Centaurs have the same lifespan as a human, so it's most likely that this is a completely new character to the wizarding world. Hogwarts Legacy seems to have multiple big bads, but none of them are more dangerous than Ranrok, a goblin leading a rebellion against the likes of all witches and wizards. It's said that Ranrok has seen a glimmer of magic that wizard kind tried to hide, even from themselves, and he wants that power in particular. Once Ranrok gets what he wants, no one will be able to stop him, and the wizarding world will be doomed. While not he who shall not be named, it's pretty clear Ranrok is just as evil, with a sinister plot our character will no doubt become entangled with. It's clear that most relationships between goblins and wizards within the game are well beyond words, and as we've seen in multiple gameplay clips, we will come face to face with many a goblin on the battlefield. At the time of Hogwarts Legacy, Ranrok is just the next goblin leader to lead an anti-wizard rebellion. During the 17th and 18th century, a number of bloody conflicts would disrupt the wizarding world. Most memorable was a rebellion in the 18th century led by Urg the Unclean, a goblin that would eventually be immortalized on a chocolate frog card. I have no doubt Ranrok will be a major boss encounter at some point during our Hogwarts Legacy gameplay, and by the looks of things, he will be a formidable foe. The next character I want to talk about is Eleazar Fig. By all accounts, this is an incredibly important figure within Hogwarts Legacy, as he was featured prominently in the State of Play showcase when the team was revealing the main concept of the story. By the multiple glimpses we've seen of good old Eleazar, it's clear that he is an important ally to uncovering the ancient secret that our character is investigating. Seen here inspecting an ancient magic symbol on what appears to be some sort of enchanted mirror, some speculate he might actually be the Study of Ancient Runes professor, a class we know exists thanks to the Harry Potter books. It would make sense that our character would need to enlist the help of someone like Fig to help understand the mystery of ancient magic. It's clear he's an older wizard, but also incredibly powerful, going toe-to-toe with Ranrok, one of the game's main antagonists. This could point to him being an even more important figure, such as a headmaster, but that does seem a bit too similar to the Harry Potter arc. Just my opinion. What I find most interesting is that Fig seems to be entangled in two major story threads: the Goblin Uprisings, which is that continuation of the rebellions from the 17th and 18th centuries, as talked about in the books, as well as helping the player character with their understanding of ancient magic. It's unclear how and if those two ideas are linked together, but it is clear that Eleazar Fig will be a central figure in the world of Hogwarts Legacy. While clearly unsavory, there's very little we know about the next character, Victor Rookwood, outside of his name. As the leader of a faction of dark wizards, it's clear he has aligned himself with Ranrok, looking to disrupt the status quo within the wizarding world, I would guess to seize power for himself. But what's also clear is that this relationship with the goblins is an uneasy alliance. Notable in this quick scene, we can see the two leaders arguing, which leads me to believe that their relationship will be an interesting aspect of the story. Other than that, we don't know much about Rookwood other than the fact that we'll be battling plenty of dark wizard cronies, presumably under his command. During the Sorting Hat ceremony, we get a glimpse at two completely unknown characters. I'm actually going to go out on a limb here and say that this character on the left is the current headmaster of the school, Phineas Nigellus Black. Born in 1847 at the time of Hogwarts Legacy, he would be in his early 40s, which looks spot on based on this scene. The proud, pureblood Slytherin was said to be the least popular headmaster in the history of Hogwarts, according to Sirius Black, but why he got that reputation is unclear. In this scene, we see he's wearing green, the main color associated with Slytherin House, just another indicator that that's who we're dealing with here. If this is Phineas Black, it'll be interesting to see if and how his reputation as the worst manifests itself in the game, if at all. He's a stern-looking character, and I have no doubt as headmaster, he'll factor into the story in some sort of meaningful way. Now on the flip side is the other character seen during the Sorting Hat ceremony, another unknown person within Hogwarts Legacy. At this point, this could be Eupraxia Mole, who was headmistress of Hogwarts during the 1870s. There's a lot of wiggle room here, and even though it's 2 decades later in the 1890s, there's always the possibility that she stayed on at Hogwarts as a professor or some other auxiliary role. If we parallel her to characters like McGonagall from the books, she could now be the Transfiguration teacher, a class we still know nothing about within the context of the game. Nevertheless, she's an interesting character, and I'm excited to learn more about her. In the same scene, we also get a small, albeit blurry glimpse of another teacher behind the Sorting Hat ceremony. We can see this witch here, and based on what we know of Natsai Onai, the companion character, it's perfectly logical to think that this could be her mother, the new divination professor. She shares the same dark complexion and is seen with a traditional African headscarf, which would make sense considering Natsai's family is from Africa. Since we're talking about her mother, let's pivot slightly and talk about Natsai Onai, the first of 4 companion characters within the game. Natsai is a Gryffindor who grew up in Matabele Land, Africa, where she attended Wagadu. For those that don't know, Wagadu is an African wizarding school located in the Mountains of the Moon in western Uganda. It's said that Wagadu is the largest of the 11 wizarding schools. Instead of students receiving a letter of acceptance into the school like is done at Hogwarts, the school uses dream messengers to invite students to Wagadu. When her mother took up the post of divination professor at Hogwarts, Natsai transferred schools. There's actually a neat parallel there with our character and Natsai both being new students to Hogwarts while not being first-year students. I would imagine that dynamic is going to play out in some sort of dialogue between our characters. From what we've seen of Natsai in the trailers, she has a deep love for learning, but isn't afraid to throw caution to the wind if the need arises. Little is known about our next companion, Poppy Sweeting. What we do know is that she has a love for all manner of magical creatures and believes they have far more redeeming qualities than most humans. It's no secret that magical beasts will play a huge part in the Hogwarts Legacy experience. In fact, we think they're such a huge part that we went ahead and put together a separate video just focused on these fantastical creatures. It makes sense then to have a companion, in this case Poppy, so in tune with that aspect of the world. During the Centaur scene we talked about before, we can actually see that Poppy is with the player character. My guess is that when it comes to the safety or well-being of magical creatures, Poppy will bend the rules to make sure they're safe, which could be the reason for entering the Forbidden Forest. Nevertheless, she'll be an important ally and one I think will have quite an interesting story. Our next companion is Sebastian Sallow, a Slytherin and a character we've seen quite a bit of leading up to launch. Based on what we know, Sebastian is looking for a way to cure his twin sister Annie of a mysterious curse. His solution is dark magic. We know that this is Sebastian's uncle, and I believe, based on some of the footage in and around the same house Hagrid lived in, that this man is Hogwarts' gameskeeper. He even says if he catches Sebastian using dark magic, he'll report him to the headmaster. It's a serious threat, but we also see this character again coming to the aid of Sebastian in a crypt in the Forbidden Forest, which says to me he's got a personal stake in Sebastian's future. To be honest, Sebastian seems like the Hogwarts Legacy version of Ron, with a little more Fred and George sprinkled in. In one trailer, we see him get caught in the restricted section of the library, and he's the first to jump up to practice dueling during Defense Against the Dark Arts. If I am reading this right, I've got a sneaking suspicion that Sebastian is going to get our character into a world of deadly trouble. The final companion character we know of is Amit Thakkar, a Ravenclaw who dreams of one day being a famous wizard historian. Unfortunately, we have yet to see Amit in any Hogwarts Legacy trailer or gameplay, but we do have a small bit of information on him, thanks to the Hogwarts Legacy Twitter. Amit is said to be exceptionally bright and well-read and has a passion for stargazing. Apparently, Amit will leap at the chance to help a friend in need, but once in the thick of things, he'll often realize he might be better off reading or writing about a certain adventure than experiencing them for himself. Sadly, that's all we know about this fourth companion, but that's alright, it gives us plenty more to uncover once the game launches. If you've checked out our ultimate preview video for Hogwarts Legacy, then you'll know that attending class is a big part of progression within the game. At this time, there are 4 major classes, led by 4 prominent witches and wizards. In Charms, we'll learn under the twinkling eye of Professor Abraham Ronan, a jovial and lighthearted individual. He's known for his playful spirit and for incorporating games into his teaching, which we got a glimpse of in one of the developer showcases. In Herbology class, students will learn under Mirabelle Garlick, a London-born witch that grew up in a house full of muggles. She radiates sunshine and charm and is said to have truly blossomed once she arrived at Hogwarts. In stark contrast to Mirabelle is Aesop Sharp, the potions teacher, an ex-Auror with an impressive knowledge of battle-worthy elixirs and drafts. His curriculum is said to be amongst the most challenging within Hogwarts. Not easily impressed, winning over this professor may be the key to your success against the evil that's enveloping the world. Finally, we have Dina Hecate, the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher. As a former Ministry of Magic employee, she's a stern but likable professor that prefers a more hands-on approach to teaching. Some say her time in the Department of Mysteries has left her with a need to satiate a desire for action. Speaking of professors, it's pretty safe to assume this character here is Professor Binns, who has taught history of magic at Hogwarts for decades. Notorious for his incredibly boring classes and being one of, if not the only ghost on staff at Hogwarts, it's pretty clear that that's who we're looking at here. Since we see our player character sitting in the front row, it's safe to assume some part of our adventure will have us listening to a boring history of magic lecture, my guess about the Goblin rebellions. From one ghost to the next, we can't talk about the who's who around Hogwarts without talking about nearly Headless Nick, or Sir Nicholas de Mimsy Porpington. Executed in the 15th century for accidentally causing King Henry VII's wife to grow a tusk, he's been a fixture of Hogwarts for centuries. As a former Gryffindor, he's most closely associated with that house and those students, but in the context of the game, I can see his jovial nature working to interact with our player character regardless of what house we're in. In the one clip we've seen of nearly Headless Nick, we can see our character and the ghost walking through a cemetery. Nick goes on about joining the Headless Hunt, something all Harry Potter fans should recognize, and it seems this is some sort of side quest because our character is holding a platter of some sort of food. If this truly is a side quest, I'm all for it, as it's a great way to weave in some established lore within the game. While not technically a ghost, Hogwarts Legacy puts us face to face with one of the series' most notorious tricksters, Peeves The Poltergeist. The 1890s is actually when Peeves enjoys some new freedoms within the world after a failed attempt to oust him in the late 1870s allowed him a formal contract with the school's headmistress. Regardless of that, like his namesake implies, Peeves is a pain, and while we haven't seen much of him yet, we know he'll be a constant thorn in the side of our adventures. The person who caught Sebastian in the library, well, that was Peeves. We've also seen Peeves sliding down a banister while we were running by, as well as juggling some sort of pins outside of a doorway. Tricks are the name of the game, and I'm sure we'll pay the price for that many times throughout our adventures. One of the characters I'm most excited to meet is Deek, a house elf that acts as a sort of guide during our discovery of the Room of Requirement. I love the introduction of house elves within the game, and I really hope Deek is a staple within it. While most likely just a pipe dream, it would be great to have him actively helping out around the room, even integrating him in some way to speed up some element of production. It could be a great and relatively simple way to make Deek not only a story character, but a functional one as well. According to the trailer, Deek will be there when we discover the Vivarium, the place where we'll raise magical creatures. Outside of that, we don't know much about how else the house elf will come into the picture, but we did get this awesome shot of our character walking through the kitchen, so expect even more house elf interactions in the future. There's one final notable character I want to mention, and it's this Goblin here. We can see pretty clearly that he's non-hostile, talking to our player character, presumably about some sort of story element. It makes sense that not all goblins are evil, and I have to imagine he's giving us some background or important information about Ranrok or the Goblin Rebellion, something that will aid us on our quest. We don't know his name, we don't know if he's a major character or a minor character, but I thought it was worth pointing out. To wrap up this video, I wanted to point out 5 final characters we've seen throughout the various trailers and gameplay showcases. Witches and wizards I don't think will play a big role in anything major, but characters we've seen nonetheless. First, we see this witch here summon a broomstick and fly off into the sky. She was shown in the Hogwarts Legacy reveal, and while she might be a Quidditch captain or something like that, maybe an outlier character, I don't think she's anyone too important. In fact, we see a number of characters throughout the reveal trailer that could be someone, but I believe they're all just representing player characters in a cinematic way. Keep in mind that these were all showcased during the reveal trailer, where the goal was to make the most appealing showcase of the game possible to spark interest. I don't want to read too far into this because I think we'll just be spinning our wheels. We did also get a glimpse at some important shop vendors and Hogsmeade quest givers who, while important, most likely won't play a bigger role in our adventures. The kicker being this witch here, who is part of the exclusive PS5 questline involving a haunted Hogsmeade shop. And there you have it, some of the exciting, intriguing, and bizarre characters we'll meet during our adventures in Hogwarts Legacy. If you guys can't tell, we are really excited about this game, and while it's not guaranteed to be a success, we can't wait to dive in on February 10th to check it out. If you are interested in following our adventures in Hogwarts Legacy, we'd love to have you along for the ride. Drop a like below and consider subscribing so you never miss a new video. Although Hogwarts Legacy is a single-player game, we still want to invite you to join our Legacy gaming community on Discord. We recently revamped the entire server with a special section just for Hogwarts Legacy, so check out the link below and join today. My name is Codiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.